Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today is Quayln from Quoe, the company name Quoe. Hi, Quayln. Thank you so much for being guest of my
Hello.
channel.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
So, I stumbled on Instagram at your profile, and I had this double feeling because on one hand, you are the age of my kids. On the other hand, I want to be you when I grow up. Like the thing that sort of impressed me the most is that you have this thing about you when you sort of go like what can possibly go wrong and you jump in first and then you figure out how to swim. And the first story that I've heard about you was how you approach Red Heart and how you got contract with them. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yes. So I started crocheting in high school, in freshman year of high school. And it, probably I did that for about 4 years where it was just like granny squares or scarves. And then I got serious about crochet freshman year of college when I started reading patterns and working on them. And after I started reading them, a couple patterns in, I realized I could make my own. So I worked my first pattern freshman year of college. I was 19 years old. And after I did the first pattern and published it, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll be a designer now and I'll just go and get all of these designer gigs. And so after my very first pattern, I just emailed Red Heart, just reached out to them on like their Curie like email and said, hey, I'm a new designer. I'd like to design with you all. I sent them the link to that first pattern and they responded right away. And I worked with them afterwards I probably did like 20 patterns with them after.
Right. Well, when you look back at it, at that moment when you sat down and you wrote that email, are you surprised at yourself? Because, I mean, we're talking one published pattern, and there you are jumping and going for the contract, right? Like, I talk to so many
Yeah.
people who, I would ask friends of mine, why won't you reach out to these people, or why won't you try to reach out to magazines? And they're like, well, I don't think I'm good enough yet. Like, I need to get a certain level to do that. And you didn't do that. You just jumped right in. Like, tell me
Yeah.
about
I
it.
think I've always had that in me where I've done it all my life where if you don't ask for something, the answer is always going to be no. And I've never been afraid to ask for something if I really wanted it, with any aspect of my life. And a lot of the times you get yeses, and sometimes you get nos, or most of the times you'll get a non response from an email or something. But those times that you do get a yes, it's like, oh my goodness, I never would have got this opportunity had I not reached out. And so I've done that for years, and I will continue to do that for years to come, I'm sure.
Well, when people ask you about becoming a full-time designer, instead of doing this as a side gig on the side, right? Like which is a lot of people would advise you to fiber artists if you're trying to get into fiber arts as a career, continue to do your job full time, but then try it on the side, develop the business until it's well developed. You didn't do any of that either.
Correct. Yeah, for me, it's really all or nothing. I love you talked about jumping in, and I've talked about in other podcasts about jumping into something just head first. Um, with me jumping into something, I really understand what I am capable of. I know myself well, know if I'm able to do something pretty soon after getting started in it, if I can really commit to something. Um, so I think where it comes from, you have to really know that you're going to put in as much effort as you need to get the desired outcomes. And for me, I really had that passion once I started designing to make this my full-time career. So I really dedicated myself to that. So it is definitely possible to go straight into the fiber arts without any backup plan, because that's what I've done. I've done it for years and it's worked out for me great. But it also takes a certain kind of person who's really dedicated to it. And if you are that, then go full force at it, because you definitely will succeed if you're steady and continue doing what you need to be doing.
Right. Well, you mentioned that you got like along the way some no's and a lot of crickets, like when nothing happens when you send an email and there is no response. How do you deal with the rejection side of it, or with the like non-successful part of it? How do you keep yourself positive?
Sometimes I don't, for like business side of things, whenever I get no's from like companies and that sort of thing, or get my patterns turned down if I'm submitting patterns to somewhere, a lot of the time I don't ever do that. I feel like that's just part of submitting places. You're going to get a lot of no's. That's just the way that it is. That really doesn't bother me as much on the work side of things. But what I have had to get over, is whenever I work on personal projects and things for social media that don't get the response that I would necessarily like. I can work on a project that I really love and I'm passionate about for months and then not get any sort of feedback or responses from my followers, which is that is hard sometimes. And I think that has a lot to do with the algorithm now with Instagram. But it can be frustrating at times, and you just have to roll with the punches and go with the flow, because sometimes you might not get the response you want, and then sometimes you might work on something for just a minute or two and post that, and then that goes viral, it blows up. So it really is very wishy-washy on the social media side, but you just got to go with it.
Right. Well, so like when I'm looking at your Instagram, there is almost like two sides of you. There is this conservative side where you post like patterns that are very like streamlined, sort of like crowd pleasers. And then there is the wild sort of side of you. How do you decide what you're gonna work on? And like from because it's a business for you, right? How do you decide how much of yourself you can show?
um what's definitely changed over the years, whenever I first started, it was mostly all that conservative kind of very classical patterns and that kind of thing that are very easily digestible for the masses. That's now what I look at as like my paycheck. That's what really pays the bills. Whenever I'm doing those freelance things, the patterns that I do for myself or just the projects that don't even have a pattern, those really are my artistic expression, and those are what I love to do. What I do crafting for is that kind of thing. But I treat the other patterns that are more approachable for beginners or for audiences in general. Those are what I use to pay my bills.
Do you ever get bored
So
with
yeah,
them?
there, not necessarily, usually because they're so beginner level, because most pattern companies want you to have patterns that a lot of people can easily get into. Because they're so simple most of the time, it's really easy for me to churn it out very quickly, so I don't have to focus on them for too long. The making part of things does take a little bit and is a little bit tedious at times, but for the most part, I'm okay with
Right.
it.
Well, like when you look at yourself, like to me, you sort of like almost a marketing genius because you know how to get interest on social media, but you also work with the magazines and you also teach. So, like, you really sort of build it as a career, is the income like very proficiently. Like, you're not trying one thing that's failing, you're trying another, you're trying it all at the same time, and it
Yeah.
somehow it works. Is it hard for you to juggle all those balls? Like, is it hard for you to decide what you're gonna spend more time on?
It is hard. But I think that's how I've always worked, is juggling a million different things at once. Sometimes it gets overwhelming a little bit. Especially the last couple months, I've been a little overwhelmed with work because of a few different projects that I've been working on. But it's that's what I thrive in, is on that, like, I have 13 deadlines and they're all like in the next couple weeks. That's the kind of thing that I always do. And like you said, whenever I'm trying things out, I always throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So if one or two things don't work, I still have all these other things that are working. And I try to diversify not only what I'm doing, but also where my money is coming from as well, because the fiber arts industry is not as steady as I would like it to be. So there's always the potential for one or two of my income streams to be cut off at any time. So that's what I also think, if you're going to get into this industry, you have to make sure that you're diversifying your portfolio and diversifying your income streams as much as possible as well,
Right.
because you never know when one or two of them is going to get cut off.
What's your favorite part? Like, which side of income gives you the most joy?
I love doing my personal patterns. Those are my favorite thing to do, probably. Those definitely pay the least out of everything. I still haven't figured out how best to market my personal patterns. Those I usually am in red a lot of the times with either tech editors and the people that my person that does the layout. I usually end up spending more on the pattern than I get back in revenue, but I love to do it. And those are my favorite thing. My favorite thing that actually is a steady income for me right now is actually doing TikToks for the Making app, which I absolutely love the Making app and their entire everybody over there. So it's really fun that they're allowing me to make just TikToks that I want to make of just me joking around about fiber arts. That I really am enjoying that.
Right. How do you come up with those ideas? Like, do you have a list of ideas? Do they just pop up because of something that's happening with you? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, for those videos, there's a few different ways that I come up with them regularly. Um, Either there's a sound on TikTok at the time that I think, oh my gosh, this would be funny if I put it in this way for fiber arts. Or I do have a list on my phone of things that I want to talk about in some aspect. So whenever I figure out best way to approach it, like the funniest way or whatever, those I'll bring those in as well. But those are the two main ways that it happens.
Right. Well, you grew up in a very conservative environment, basically, right? How difficult was it for you to decide to like put yourself out there, to show yourself like the wild side of you, to show the
Mhm.
creative side of you? Was it a difficult process, or did you just woke up one day and decided this is time?
It was pretty much like that. I always knew, since I was very young, that it would come to that where I was able to finally showcase myself. And then probably, I think it was December of 2021 or 2020 or 20, no, it was 2020, sorry. December of 2020 was whenever I decided, you know what, I think it's time, because at that point in my life I had gotten really stagnant. I felt like I wasn't really progressing as an artist. And I really needed to finally showcase what my full capabilities was, because at the time I felt like I was really holding myself back from those crazy designs that I've always had in my head but have never been able to put out there. And as soon as I did those first few photo sets, I knew that I could never go back and that I had to continue with really expressing myself creatively to the fullest extent, because that's what made me feel the most authentic, and that's what made me feel, um, the best in what I was doing. That really reinvigorated me in my fiber arts and my craft.
How did your friends and family react to you starting showing your pictures in the new way? Were they all supportive, or was there some like backlash as well?
Pretty much everybody in my core group was supportive from the beginning. The only pushback that I really saw immediately was followers of mine, especially on Instagram. TikTok, not as much. TikTok, pretty much from the start, was really cool. I really love TikTok as a platform because of that. But Instagram, I have cultivated for so long this follower base of people who only were following me for my free patterns, for those patterns that was like really simple, beginner friendly kind of stuff. And so whenever I started posting things of myself, it was a shock to them, I'm sure. And I got a lot of unfollows from it. I got some nasty messages, but those followers that I lost, I gained back in new followers tenfold. And those new followers were a lot more loyal and supportive because they see the real me and they love it. So they defend it, and they know exactly what they're getting now.
How about like the companies that you work with? Were they surprised, or were they expecting you to fit into certain box?
Um, most of the companies that I've worked with have been great about it. Especially like making, I absolutely love them and how they have approached everything. They've been completely amazing. Same with like Clover Needle Craft. I work with them a lot. I have had a couple little pushbacks from companies about me being more out there. But those companies said with diversifying your businesses, I don't really need them, and have been kind of cutting them off as I go, because I don't want to affiliate myself with people that don't want to be affiliated with me at my authentic self. And I don't need them. So there have been a couple, but in the long, it's going to be fine because I'm getting rid of them. So
Well, you're not only doing crochet, you also like somebody suggested that you'll do a knitting of the same design, and you said sure, and then like you became a knitting designer overnight, even though you didn't really knit before that. And you recently created this gown from the feed sacks, like that I saw was like amazing in 2 days or something. Is there something in fiber arts that you always wanted to try but just didn't have time to try yet?
there is the only thing, I think, pretty much the only like big craft that I haven't done yet is weaving. Just because it's like a lot to get into. You have to get the looms and that kind of stuff. I haven't done that yet. I'm sure I will in the future, but that is the one craft I have not touched really yet.
Do
But
you,
yeah, pretty much every other fiber craft I do partake in, and usually do designs and that kind of stuff for it as well.
so when you learn like the new fiber craft, right? Like when you jumped into knitting, how do you learn? Like what materials do you use? Do you go to YouTube? Do you read books? Do you just figure it out for yourself? Like what's your learning process?
It really is all of that. I usually start with a rudimentary, like beginner level idea of the concepts through YouTube and books. And once I have the bare, like basics of whatever it is, I understand it and I understand how it works, then I will usually work through it on my own and figure out my own ways of doing things. Like for knitting, whenever I started knitting, I actually tried to knit before I crocheted, but I couldn't figure it out with all of the instructions that I was given and the videos that I would watch. It didn't really make sense to me. But after crocheting, I figured out knitting better because I knew how to hold my yarn in my left hand already. So I was a continental knitter. I'd always been taught how to English knit, and I could never understand it like that. And figuring it out continental, after learning the basics, the rudimentary, like how to do knitting and knit stitch and pearl stitch. Then I worked on it myself and I figured out how to combination knit kind of on my own. And I didn't know there was even a name for it for a couple years, but that's kind of a good example of me just trying to do it myself and figure out how best I can do it, how easy I can do it, like make it as easy as possible, make it as fast as possible, and efficient, is just working through it myself.
When you teach now, when you teach your classes, do you think it helps you, the fact that this is your learning approach? Do you think you can connect to people better this way because this is how you learn?
I definitely think so because I know not only how to do it in the quote unquote correct way, where it's like very formulaic and written down, these are the rules, but I also know just intrinsically how to actually create whatever I'm creating. I know how like stitches are formed. I know just the how it's actually being made. So in doing that and learning that way, I can explain to my students, this is how it is technically made, and there are a lot of different paths that you can use to achieve these results. So it's not just this one standard way that you have to do it, because a lot of people can't learn whatever specific way you're trying to teach them. So you have to approach it in there's a lot of different ways you can use to get the same results. And that's not just from like just a mental aspect. Sometimes people need to be accommodated because of disabilities, or they're just not understanding whatever I'm trying to teach them. So because of that flexibility, it helps a lot more people, and it's a lot more approachable for everyone in general to understand um, that this is how you like create something. And it doesn't have to be the standard practice. You're still just as much of a crafter as the people that do it the standard way. You're still achieving the same results no matter what way you use to get to that.
Right. Well, when you think about it, right, sometimes you'll come to the festival, yarn festival, and you have hundreds of instructors. Some of them are like hand master knitters or master crocheters who wrote bunch of books on the techniques, have like videos of the proper technique and everything. Do you ever doubt yourself? Do you ever say like, what do I know? Like, I'm not an expert. Like, how do you deal with the imposter syndrome?
I do get it on occasion, but I don't know. It's never really become that much of an issue for me. I will say the first time that I really had that happen to me was I did a class in Dallas Fort Worth Fiber Fest, and that was in 2019. I was 21, I think, at the time, and I did a couple classes over crochet cables. They went great, but afterwards there's like a teacher meetup thing that we all the teachers get together and take a photo, and I was probably the youngest by like 20 years or so from all the other teachers. So that was really like, I was like, oh my goodness, like I look like an infant with all of these like adults. But um it's just what I've had to deal with as I work in the industry as a teacher and designer. It's most designers and teachers are older. So as someone who's a lot younger than the standard, I'm going to get that all the time. I'm going to get people not taking me seriously as much, especially for teaching, not necessarily for designing, because I show them exactly what I've done for designing. But for teaching, it has been hard to like get some teaching jobs because they see me and they see, oh, this kid should be taking these classes. He shouldn't be teaching them. So the imposter syndrome for me is manageable, but for the other people that are actually hiring me,
Right.
that's what they have to get over. But yeah.
Well, how did you decide the first time, right? When you applied for your first teaching gig? What was in your head? How did you decide that it's the right thing for you to do?
The first teaching gig that I had was actually on accident, kind of. It was at the East Texas Fiber Festival. and I had emailed them because they had just opened their teaching applications, and I'd emailed them questions about teaching, like, hey, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking about teaching, I don't know if this is something I would want to do, blah blah blah. And they responded to me like, okay, what day do you want, what time do you want, you have the gig. And so that I was like, oh my goodness, I guess I'm teaching now. So that was really the first thing. And then whenever I actually taught, it ended up being a couple people canceled. It was a small class anyway. It was only like 3 people. So I ended up only having one student, and it was crochet cables as well. Because at the time I was really into crochet cables, and she was actually a left-hander. So that's where it comes in, the other stuff that I had been saying, where I know how to do the stitch no matter what. So I really got the time to teach her as a left-hander how to do the same thing that I was able to do as a right-hander, and doing it the opposite way, because I knew exactly how those stitches are formed. You can, whenever you know that, instead of just the rules of something, you can explain to them how to achieve those results. And I'm really glad the very first person I had to teach was a left-hander, because it was a little bit of a learning curve, but we definitely got there.
Right. Well, like, how did you change as an instructor from that first gig to where you now? Like, do you already know the right words to say, the right amount of material to present? Like, do you feel like you are a total pro now?
Definitely not a total pro, but I think I've definitely gotten better. I don't enjoy the long form 3 hour classes. Those are not really my gig right now. So usually at fiber festivals and that kind of thing, they have those long form 3 hour classes, which I can do. I just really don't enjoy them as much. I feel like the people get fatigued. I get fatigued as a teacher. Nobody just wants to sit and do something for 3 hours and listen to a lecture for 3 hours. So right now, whenever I can, I do the shorter form, hour and a half, 30-minute even classes, which keeps the students a lot more engaged. And I can get the same exact results in a shorter amount of time. So I like to condense them as much as I can.
Right. Well, when you talk about cable crochet cables, this is like more difficult technique than like your single crochets or double crochets. What brings you more pleasure? Like when you work on something that you can watch Netflix with, or when your mind is totally like on fire, engaged?
It depends on the day, because sometimes I really want that project that I really have to focus on, that's super detailed, that I can just like immerse myself in that project. And then other times I really want to watch a TV show, so I have to grab a stockinette beanie and work on that. It really just depends on whatever mood I'm in at the time.
Right. How about pricing of your patterns? Like, do you ever get frustrated with like how much work you put into a pattern and how much you can actually get out of selling it?
So not especially for like my personal patterns. I approach those as those are my passion project. That's just me doing it for fun. If nobody bought them, which has happened with a few of them because they are very niche, I understand that. um, then it's fine. But for the freelance patterns, those are usually a standard fee, so I don't really have to worry about that as much. So pricing for me has not been a problem, and I don't have as much enough eyes on my personal patterns to where I have to worry about people like complaining about pricing and that kind of stuff. I price my patterns pretty fairly, I would say, so it's not been an issue.
Right. And you do a lot of work for like new upcoming rappers with your personal designs. How did that start? Like, why rappers?
I love, okay, so my favorite type of music is probably female rap. Um, Guy rap is okay, but really my favorite is female rap because they're just so much more emotional and thoughtful in their lyrics. Their lyrics are very beautifully put. A lot of the time they could be like really like hard hitting lyrics for me that just really get to me. And I've always liked that since I was very young, probably seventh grade. I got into like Nicki Minaj was my gateway drug into female rap. And so I've always really enjoyed female rappers. But another thing I love about female rappers is they are very into fashion, number one, but specifically handmade fashion. A lot of the times, it's been for years, female rappers have supported the handmade movement. They've supported independent designers, crocheters, knitters, ever since I would say probably Missy Elliott was probably the first that I know of that would wear like hand knit sweaters and that kind of thing. So there's definitely something there between female rappers and fiber artists. I probably could write an essay or something about it at some point,
Probably
but
should.
there's definitely, yeah, there's definitely a connection there. And one of them that I really enjoy, probably one of my favorites at the moment, if not my favorite, is Tierra Whack, who is really avant-garde. She's really out there with her music, but also her fashion. And ever since starting listening to her, I knew I was like, oh my goodness, I really, really could see Tierra in some of my pieces. I think that they would work really well together. So one day I was on Instagram on one of her stories I'd seen, and I swiped up and just like messaged her and was like, hey, you should let me knit you something or something like that. And literally like a minute later, she responded and she's like, send me some pictures of your stuff. What have you done? And in just like 30 minutes, we had already set up where I was making her something. So I ended up making her 3 pieces. She's only posted one so far, but I still um, plan on making her other pieces as I go. I haven't had really time right now because of a few projects to do personal, like avant-garde and stuff that I love. But whenever I start getting more into that, I'm going to be probably doing more stuff with her. And I've worked with a few others like Carol's Daughter, who's an alternative like pop punk, I would say, who's amazing. I'm actually working with her currently. And I've done things for Crying Camilla, who's like I would say she's more R&B and singer songwriter. But yeah, I love and I really love to work with the up and coming people as well, because they're just getting their start in that kind of stuff. I'm just getting my start in like patterns for other people uh, to wear. So I think it's a great match.
Well, is there like a person that it's your absolute dream to work with?
I would absolutely see myself one day working with Lady Gaga or Nicki Minaj or Beyonce. I could see that. That is like the big, like big fish.
Well, I hope that's gonna happen. I hope that's coming soon. I would be very interested to see what you're gonna create for them. I mean, do you ever have to sort of scale yourself, like hold yourself down a little bit and not be as outrageous as you want? Like, how do you decide like how far you're gonna push your personal designs?
Not so I yes and no, because not I'm never holding myself back in terms of like outlandish design that I just let myself go as big as I want. Sometimes I'll do a design that could be controversial. I never shy away from that kind of stuff. What I do have to hold myself back from is I really, really love going and like creating a million ideas and really wanting to do all of them at the same time. That's where I struggle, is because I want to do everything all of the time. So I do have to hold myself back and say, you can only work on these few projects, get those done, and then you can move on to the next. Because I'm constantly having, oh, this would be a great idea for a business. I should start this business, or this would be a great pattern collection. Let me go start on that. And so I do have to hold myself back in terms of like making sure that I'm actually finishing projects that I start, because I have been bad about that in the past.
I've heard about you coming up with the hot sauce idea. Is that still happening?
That is definitely going to still happen. I have always wanted a hot sauce with my branding on it. And that is one of those things that I've had to put on pause because of another big project that I've been working on. But yes, that is still coming, and it's going to be in a pattern collection with merchandise. And I found a manufacturer for it. So it's definitely going to still happen in hopefully the next year, I would say.
How organized are you with all the designs? Like you keep on saying that you like doing 13 things at the same time, but like are you very organized about it? Do you divide your day like I'm gonna work 2 hours on this and then tomorrow I'm gonna do this? Or is it like you're an artist and whatever comes to your head, this is what you're gonna do?
Yeah, I do keep organized for things that I have deadlines for. Those things are set in my day. I have to get this done by this day. I have to get this done by this day. So those are completely set. Now, my personal projects, those are just as I'm feeling like it. After I've gotten everything else done, then I will decide what I want to work on that day. So the personal projects can be they can take a while because it's just whenever I feel like working on them. Um, but any project that has a deadline, I'll make sure to get those done first.
Right. So, like some of the pictures that you posted are really sort of showstoppers. Like, you can't just scroll by them, you have to slow down, like, look and zoom in and, like, see all the details. Are you ever concerned that you, like, gonna run out of ideas and that you already put your most inventive self out there?
Absolutely not. I have way too many ideas, if anything, that I'll never get to. I constantly am having just like brain blasts of different patterns and ideas that I could do. I have those all written down in my journals, and I've had them in there for years probably that I have not been able to get to. So that's never a concern for me. Like what my next pattern is going to be, that kind of thing, because I can always pull from the long list of things that I need to get done eventually.
What's your advice to people who just starting with like social media or YouTube channels and like trying to balance their designing work with all of that? Like, how do you find that balance?
I'm still trying to find the balance. I'm not the best at finding that balance. But I would say just do whatever feels best to you. What's giving you the most joy is to work on that kind of stuff. Don't be discouraged whenever you're first starting out to not have that immediate base of followers that are supportive and commenting and that kind of stuff. That takes a lot of time to cultivate, and just keep at it because it might take a few years. I think that fiber crafters in general are more easily accepting of that because it's called slow fashion for a reason. It takes time to make these things. So I think the fiber crafters in general are a lot more patient as people. But still sucks sometimes whenever it's slow going to build that audience and getting those eyes on it. It is hard sometimes, but you have to just continue to be consistent with it because eventually one day one of those things that you do is going to pop off and be really big, and then you'll get a lot more traction starting to come in.
Well, when you look at your career, do you think there was some like lucky moment for you that without that specific event, nothing would happen? Or do you think it's your hard work and perseverance and not giving up and like trying again and again that got you where you are today?
I think I would have gotten to where I was today without any of those big events. I think I definitely could have. It may have taken a little bit longer, but I feel confident in the fact I could have gotten to where I was. I think that there have been those events like every so often that do really change that trajectory and either speed up the process, what have you, change the creative like direction. I would say the one that I can point to as like the first one was I crocheted a uh, shawl called the Levivo M shawl, and it is shaped like a bat's wings. I think that that was the first one that really started to get eyes on me as, oh my gosh, this is actually like a designer, like capital D designer, not just somebody that like makes a couple cowl patterns, you know. I think that that was a turning in my career for sure.
Well, I hope that was just a turning point in your career and there is tons of more in front of you, and I can't wait to see what else you're gonna design and what you're gonna create. I love seeing your pictures. I love seeing how like free you are with your craft and how creative you are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being a guest of my channel today. Really loved getting to know you better.
Of course, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.